So this May, on May 31st, 2022, we announced our new branding, which is Microsoft Entra. And we got a lot of questions from customers like, what is Entra? Is this a new name for Azure Active Directory? Why we are rebranding? So let me start by giving that baseline to all of you. Azure Active Directory is going nowhere. It is our core hero identity and access management product. But we are adding more products and portfolios into our identity and access management stack. So I'm going to give you a glimpse of the products that we have in the Entra branding. But what's so special about the word Entra? If you look at the word Entra, Entra means it is your entry gate to new opportunities for innovation. It's not like a gateway to restrict or block a user to go through some security controls, but it is all about how a user can innovate with the services that you offer. So I'll build on that. And I'm sure you have heard about these terms, and I don't need to spend much on it. All of us are going through this digital transformation phases. Even Microsoft, when you look at the products that we develop, we keep on adding more capabilities based on what customers are asking. We also see that when we look at identity, it is just not user as an identity object now. We look at apps, we look at workload identities, we look at IoT devices, and we also see that as we see new opportunities coming in the digital transformation world, there are more touch points for vulnerability and attacks. So how from the product portfolio can we give you a bunch of tools so that you can make your setups secure and better, and obviously offer innovation services to your users. So with Entra, it's all about how we can offer capabilities not only for users who are connected to a directory system, but also to admins who are looking at multi-cloud setups, or to a user who is wearing multiple personas. So all of us, when we are in our work profile, we have our work account, right? So 9 to 5, we use our organization identity. But when we go back, or when we are doing some personal transaction, we carry a different persona. I may use my Hotmail account to do some transaction. I may have an account with a retailer to get some discounts as well. I may use some account in my financial domain. So how we can make sure that a user, the same user who is moving across personas across the day, how we can give them secure services as they go along from one persona to another. When they move from one persona to another, can there be a better model to verify them as well? Because if I am looking at, let's say, a financial transaction, and let's say I'm applying for a mortgage application, can I do it in a better way, which is not only better for the organization, but better model for the user as well? How I can make sure the zero trust principle is in place. I can offer least privilege access and give right access at right time. And in all this model, how I can simplify the experience. So these are the 4 principles on which Entra is now based. And when we look at Entra, it's a new family name. If you look at Entra as a product, it's a bunch of 3 products now in the portfolio. I'm going to double click on each of the product in my talk. But the important thing I would like you to know, Entra is not equal to Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory is one of the products in Entra portfolio. The other thing I would like to highlight here is when it comes to product licensing, you will still use the current models for the products that exist in the Entra portfolio. What Entra gives us an opportunity to look at centralized models, federated models, multi-cloud models, decentralized models. So if you look at the whole landscape, I'm talking about from left, from centralized, federated to a decentralized model. So that is what the whole Entra branding is all about. So with that, let me now double click on what is there in the product portfolio. I spoke about Azure Active Directory as a start. I'm sure all of you or most of you are Azure Active Directory customers, and you've been using Azure Active Directory for your single sign-on configurations for apps. It is still our core SKU for centralized identity and access management offering. It is a cloud-mastered identity and access management offering. The second offering that we have now is permissions management. We acquired a company called CloudKnox last year. What permissions management does is it allows us to look at multi-cloud models. I'm sure you'll have deployments in Azure, AWS, Google Cloud. As an admin, I need a central pane of glass to make sure that when I have permissions for my user, I can manage it from a single dashboard. And I should be able to make sure that I can housekeep who has what permissions in what kind of resource. So permissions management is that offering. And the last offering is verified ID, which is Microsoft's implementation of an open standard on decentralized identity principles. When you look at scenarios like you're getting into an organization, how I can make sure I can make the onboarding of a user better. When a person leaves an organization as an alumni, how I can make that journey better. So you will see verified ID playing a role in those kind of scenarios. So let's double click on each of the offering, and I'll also give you some investment areas for each of our product line. Starting with Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory, as I said, is our cloud mastered identity and access management solution. I'm sure all of you look at Gartner and see what Gartner talks about when it comes to identity and access management offerings. Very recently, Gartner also said that by 2025, 70% of the deployments will move to cloud mastered as well as cloud governed identity governance based models. So Azure Active Directory offers you these capabilities. So not only it's a core IAM offering, but it also gives you a governance offering. It is based on these 4 pillars or 4 themes. How it can offer secure adaptive access, how it can look at user experiences and enhance the user experience when it comes to single sign-on configurations, how it can look at unified identity management. You may have applications that may have local accounts in the directory, or you may have accounts still in your on-premise directory, or there are some LDAP stores that exist today. How you can bring all these accounts along and maybe sync it to cloud. That's a unified identity management model. And then the last bit is around governance. When you look at cloud mastered identity and access management model, how you can bring governance along. Because these are not 2 different things. These are linked together, right? So these are the 4 principles. So let me start with secure adaptive access. Now, as the term says, and I'm sure conditional access is something like a familiar term to all of you, right? Can I have a show of hands? How many of you are using conditional access in your setup? Great. Yeah, I think almost everybody. And we know how and what it can do in an environment. So conditional access is a model that allows you to go towards zero trust principles. From the offering point of view, we offer conditional access through a security policy engine. And it can base your conditions on static rules as well as adaptive rules as well. So things like, are you the right user? Are you in the right group? Are you coming from the right location? Are you using a compliant device? And are you accessing a particular app which is meant for you? Then basis these kind of models, we've also offered integration with identity protection so that you could have adaptive controls based on user behavioral patterns, risky patterns, sign-in patterns, and you can bring things along. And then you also have now models where you can bring in conditional access evaluation. Like when I'm going through this conditional access journey as a user, I went through a condition, but that condition was checked for a given point of time. What if during that duration my state has changed? What if there is some pattern in the user behavior has changed? So conditional access evaluation is that new term that we offer now, which allows the application to keep on checking the state where the user is today, and basis that it can again enforce a conditional access condition for that particular access. So that's secure adaptive access. Another thing I would like to highlight, and this was called out in our talk yesterday too, passwords are still the weakest link in the security chain, right? And if we just implement one thing, that one thing is implementing MFA, we will actually get rid of 99.9% of security issues or identity attacks from the system. If you look at our portfolio, we offer options around MFA. We also offer various passwordless options. You could use Windows Hello for Business. You could use Authenticator app as your passwordless model, or you could use FIDO2 based models for bringing in passwordless journey. So you're enabling MFA as a first step for the user, making sure your 99.9% of identity attacks are in control. And then you could bring in passwordless journey so that you enhance the user experience, but still make sure strong authentication is in place, right? And I'm sure some of you are following the pattern around authentication methods. So as an admin, when I look at a particular application, I could also bring in a pattern where it says, as a part of my policy, the user may be required to do maybe username password as a first step, and then maybe an MFA as a second step. Authentication methods and authentication method policies are something new. If you have not explored that, please do have a look at it. I spoke about conditional access, and I saw everybody raising hand. So I don't need to explain then what is conditional access, but if you look at the scale and might of it, it is the principle that helps you go towards that zero trust model. But when you look at the scale at which we operate, we look at around 170 plus terabyte of data that is getting fed into the security policy engine, and we evaluate the system across various controls, and then basis the conditions that have been applied. Are you the right user? Are you coming from the right group? Are you coming from the right location? Is your device compliant? You can then enforce certain conditions on the user. And then it could be also go towards the next model of conditional access evaluation. It also links with identity protection. As I mentioned, you can look at the user behavioral patterns, look at risky sign-ins, look at what is the user doing in a normal state, and then the system can give you an alert based on the machine learning algorithms, looking at the user behavior pattern, sign-in patterns, and it can trigger a CA policy as well. I want to call out a case study from MVP Healthcare. You can imagine being a healthcare customer, dealing with customer data is important for them. So they looked at implementing conditional access policy, identity protection, and then feeding that data to tools like Sentinel so that they can look at what's happening in their environment and then take remedial action. So that's one case study. I thought it'll be a good reference. We will have this deck available to everybody post the event, so you could look at what they have gone ahead in terms of implementing security end-to-end. CA was their core model for implementing zero trust in the setup. Now, when I talk about seamless user experience pillar, as you can imagine, it is all about single sign-on access. But how does this map for a user, and how does it map to my application landscape? I'm sure setting up single sign-on configuration is a no-brainer, right? You could just follow a bunch of steps. But then the question comes in, I may have an application that is sitting on premises. I may have an application that is not using maybe modern ways of authentication like OAuth, OpenID Connect. It doesn't understand SCIM protocol. It may be using methods like LDAP authentication, header-based authentication, and so on. So what does Azure AD offer? So let's talk about that in this particular section. Starting with, if you look at this screenshot, it talks about the apps that we have in our gallery. We have got around 3,400 apps, which you could just go about and select and set them up for single sign-on configurations. But if you don't see an app that is an app in your setup, but the app understands modern authentication protocols like OAuth, OpenID Connect, even SAML, SCIM, you can bring that app along. You can set that up very easily for single sign-on configurations. And if you want to partner with us in your journey and say, hey, Microsoft, could you please bring that app in our gallery? Because the app does support these modern authentication protocols, we can work with you and bring that app along in the gallery as well. For apps that are sitting on premises or apps that are coming from various models, there are some patterns that are available around secure hybrid authentication access. So I'm going to talk about that too. But what does it mean for the user? When an admin has set up a single sign-on configuration, you could always go to My Access and see what is provisioned for you. But you can look at tools like My Application, where you could not only look at the apps, but also look at your profile. You can implement around, you can go through these models like self-service password reset. You can look at what are the devices that are managed by your organization that are linked to you. You may get invited to multiple organizations as a B2B guest. And you may forget about it, right, as a user. So if you go to My Applications page, you can see to what organizations you were invited. And you can then manage those relationships as well as an end user. So it gives you that, I would say, a pattern where you as a user are enabled to take care of your own data. Let's look at the other pattern around frontline managers. This is a pattern that we are seeing commonly for shop workers, contractual workers, where they don't need to have a user account. They may just have a phone number available to them. And can we use a phone number as an input to authenticate that particular user? Can they use a shared device? Because we may have staff workers who are using the same phone device, but they have to man a particular department across the 3 shifts. So frontline worker model does allow a manager to take that ownership of the workers that work under them and do activities like onboarding that particular phone number for the user, or doing activities like password reset as well. So that's an experience that is available with frontline worker and frontline managers. And this also has an integration model with Microsoft Teams. I'm guessing some of you might have experienced this experience as well. Let's build on this and look at now bringing in common identity for our users. So I'm going to talk about some of the investments that we are doing in this space. Active Directory to Azure Active Directory. I think tools like Azure AD Connect is a known tool in this space for some time now, right? You might have set up those synchronization engines to sync up your accounts from Active Directory to Azure AD. But there may be patterns where you may have I would say, a complex organization where there are not just one domain controllers or one domain, but there could be multiple such domains. Can we bring in a architecture pattern where you could sync multiple directories to Azure AD? Can I just make it lightweight, and can I have a model where if there is a disconnected forest, I can still sync that environment to Azure AD? So tools like Azure AD Connect will help you go through these journeys. And we have been making some more investments in it. Things like, what if I have to do a group write back? I created a cloud group, but I want that group to be provisioned back to on-prem so that I can enforce some policy controls to that on-premise application. So these are some of the areas that you will see Azure AD Connect moving to the next level. I'm going to talk about secure hybrid access now. This pattern comes into picture when you have on-premises applications or applications that are deployed on infrastructure as a service pattern. You may use these as VMs or applications running on VMs that are using LDAP authentication, header-based authentication, Windows Kerberos authentication, SQL authentication. And you may have questions like, can I connect these apps to Azure AD? So we offer 2 models in this space. You could always use Azure AD application proxy as one option, which means you could connect your Windows-based apps or header-based apps to Azure AD. It's like a lightweight agent that you deploy on your application, which does an outbound 443 call and then it allows, not only works like a reverse proxy, but also does the protocol translation as well. That's one pattern that we have seen customers adopting. But the other pattern that we see customers look at is, hey, I'm already using my load balancer or a reverse proxy for my on-premises app. Can you connect that same load balancer to Azure AD and just make it like a one flip switch, that load balancer talking from Active Directory to Azure AD? So we have done some integrations with the known load balancers in the market. You can see some logos on our slide. This pattern is called as secure hybrid authentication pattern, and there are things like easy button click from F5 or Citrix or CAM or Citrix NetScaler. So you could obviously choose between application proxy or secure hybrid authentication. You can always also bring two patterns along. So these are the patterns you will easily see getting plugged in with Azure AD. We get a lot of questions like, then Microsoft, what do you recommend? Should I use application proxy or should I use my load balancer? The simplest answer would be, if it's about looking at applications that are already connected to these load balancers and your existing load balancer supports Azure AD connection, that could be an easy way for you to do that switch. That's one input for that particular question. The other question could be, what's the user pattern for that application? Is it an extranet application or is it an intranet application? If it's an extranet application, you can easily choose application proxy. But if it's an intranet application, like only the users within the corporate network will access that particular application, and you already have a load balancer doing that load balancing within the network, then the preferred pattern would be using that secure hybrid access option. So I'm just giving you some food for thought. These suggestions that I spoke about are also listed on our public documentation site. Another area where we are investing heavily is on external identities. What does this mean? It means doing this B2B and B2C models, bringing in accounts from partner organizations in your directory, or allowing the users to use their consumer IDs into the application world. The idea here is, I'm sure some of you are using B2C in your customer-facing apps. B2C does give a lot of flexibility to build user journeys. B2B initially didn't have those kind of flexibility, so we are bridging the gap. Now in B2B too, you can also do self-service sign-up. You can also connect OpenID Connect providers. And also the B2B and B2C billing models have been clubbed together. It's like identical. It's based on monthly active usage billing pattern. So we're trying to make sure that B2B and B2C comes under the same external identities umbrella. We take best of both worlds. B2C gives a lot of flexibility in terms of customized user flows. B2B was leveraging and using some of the benefits of Azure Active Directory like MFA, conditional access, identity protection. So bringing the two worlds along and covering it as a service called external identities. A case study that I could refer is Kohler. They are using apps where B2B guest and B2C user accounts get provisioned. Those apps are also supporting Azure Active Directory as an identity provider. So as an employee of that organization, I can connect to that app. As a consumer of that application, I can connect to the same app. So bringing those integrations along was something Kohler had done as a part of this particular case study. Access governance. So I spoke about a Gartner quote, and when Gartner said that by 2025, 70% of the organizations will move towards cloud mastered identity governance model. We are keeping the same vision in our mind. Can we offer governance capabilities from the cloud? It doesn't mean that we have to leave the on-premises app. Can we build some models where we can bring the on-premises app along as well? So that's what we are doing in this space for some time now. I'm sure some of you are following the public announcement that we did for lifecycle workflows. So lifecycle workflows are now in public preview since August this year. What is a lifecycle workflow? I think JML or joiner mover leaver term is known to us. We have been implementing journeys for bringing a user into the directory, and then if a user moves across a department, we will do some workflows, and when a person moves out of an organization, there will be a workflow. Can we make this whole life cycle easy for an admin? Can we give you templates where, let's say I'm getting hired in Microsoft, so 7 days before my joining, I could have all the access provisioned. I could have things like my temporary access pass provisioned. So we have built some templates for joiner and leaver, and you could easily use that from the Azure portal today. So if you're OK using the templates, use the templates. But if you want to bring in some more customization to those templates, you can obviously use logic apps. Like this particular person needs to have access to PeopleSoft as a part of the onboarding. When this person goes out, their pension account needs to be updated in a specific database. So that's a leaver pattern. So you can bring these lifecycle workflows very easily in your organization with less custom effort. Use the templates as a start, and then use logic apps to bring connections to apps that could be disconnected or connected to Azure AD. Okay. Yeah, and for the guest, I spoke about pre-built workflows. In our entitlement management capability, we have self-service sign-up available for B2B guests. Like as the user goes through a self-service journey, they can also get access to a bunch of resources. And we're doing some interesting stuff in this space, so I'm going to talk about that in the coming slide. In terms of compliance, the idea here is to give a unified dashboard. So I can see what are the access packages that are available in my setup, who is using those access packages, how many privileged users are there in the setup. For the lifecycle workflows that I've configured, how many users got successfully provisioned or deprovisioned as a part of that. So the idea here is to bring a unified dashboard and also build a mobile app experience for the admin. So if there is an approver or an approval notification for an admin, they don't need to come back to a PC or a laptop to approve that. They could just get a notification on a mobile app, and they can just go through their transaction. There's a case study around DigiGirls. The idea here was whenever a user is provisioned as a B2B guest, they go through a lifecycle pattern. They only get access to a specific set of services. In this case, this customer was using Dynamics 365. And you can imagine the power for that CRM system. So if the user is moving out, an access review should clean up that user from the system. So this customer looked at implementing governance through Azure AD as the whole story here. Permissions management is our second product in our Entra portfolio. And I'm going to give a very high-level highlight to it. We'll be doing, I think there's a workshop during the second half. A colleague of mine will be doing a double click on this in a very detailed way. Please join that workshop too. So permissions management, as I said, is our product under Cloud Infrastructure Entitlement Management, or CIEM. That's what you would hear in the industry. Can I make sure as an admin, if I have resources provisioned on Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, I can manage it from a central dashboard? That's what this product is all about. It's part of our product portfolio, and it's generally available, GDPR compliant. It went into generally available mode on 1st of July this year, and we see a lot of customers going through an adoption journey of it. So let's do a double click on this particular product. I gave a very high level outline CIEM portfolio, but what does CIEM mean and what does CIEM do? As an admin, I would know that there is a pattern that exists in my setup. Whenever a user comes in, or whenever a user moves from one department to another department, they get provisioned with access. But do we clean up that particular access? Sometimes we do. Sometimes it is automated. Sometimes it is manual. But we know the user keeps on accruing permissions. And if it is in one application or in one set of infrastructure, I think it's easy to manage. But if the user is moving across resources on, when I say resources, it could be a virtual machine or a serverless function or a Lambda function. I have a specific permission on a particular resource on a cloud, which could be IaaS or PaaS, can I manage those permissions as well? So that's this product going to do for you. It does this in 3 phases. It has a phase called discover, so that you can discover what's there in your landscape. Basis your discovery, then you can take a informed decision, or you could do a remedial action based on some patterns. And then also look at what's happening in your systems, because we know with so many endpoints, maybe developers are spinning up resources on subscriptions on a fly. How could you make sure that you get alerted if there is a specific resource that gets provisioned with over-permissioned access in a particular setup? So that's what the monitor theme is all about. So starting with, I think I spoke about the dynamic approach. It ensures that your zero trust principle is in place. You give only the right permission for a given amount of time, and you continuously monitor and right size your permission. So it's not that I'm in a sales department, I should get access to a SharePoint site or a group. I should also look at a behavior pattern of a user. Does that user really need that permission? If that permission is required, then only give that permission to that user. So I'm going to talk about the 3 patterns. So I know the animation could be small for the folks at the back, but you could see the PCI, or the performance permission creep index parameter. What it says is, in my setup, which may have resources across the clouds, have I over-permissioned my resources? If they are over-permissioned, what is the PCI score? And basis that index score, can I remediate and do certain action? So PCI, or permissions creep index number, tells that particular gap between what is granted versus what is actually getting used. And then obviously you can look at usage analytics. You can look at a resource, you can narrow it down to a group or to a user and see what is the user using actually in the setup. Basis the discovery, then there could be a remedial action. That remedial action could be like a pattern that you can say, like if I see this particular user not using a particular resource after 6 p.m., remove that access. So you can build these kind of patterns as well. You can also look at patterns per resource, per subscription, per environment. So you can remediate and manage manually, automatically, and then also implement this model of provisioning permissions on demand. And lastly, permissions management does give you that monitor and alert capability as well. If my developers are provisioning resources on an Azure subscription, what kind of permissions they have? Are they following the right DevOps cycle? So it allows you to get detailed reports. You can also build your custom reports as well, basis the setup that you may have in your environment. So that was permissions management. Let me talk about the last product, which is Verified ID. And this is very close to my heart. I run this charter for EMEA region for customers. What is Verified ID? Verified ID is the portfolio of product that is around decentralized principle. As a user, can I control my own identity? That's the whole premise of this technology. Now, what does that mean? As a user, I can own my control and control my identity. I even do that today. I use my own username, password. But if you look at that particular pattern, you are getting an object ID from a directory. You don't own your account. Your directory system is owning your account. All the applications that are linked to that directory system are owning that access. So that is centralized model. Decentralized model means I can present my identity to an application. I can then revoke my access on my own. I can see transparently where I had presented my identity. So let's double click on this particular capability and see what this service has to offer. As I said, we have been implementing open standards, and the whole premise here is user may today use a Microsoft app. User may also need some self-attested data in their identity. User may need some attributes from a database, can I bring all these parameters along and give a credential to a user? That's verified ID. You can use verified ID in these patterns. I spoke about joiner, mover, leaver as an example, and I spoke about lifecycle management. But think about your onboarding to your organization. I'll give an example about myself. When I got hired in Microsoft many years ago, I was told, hey Rohit, can you bring a photocopy of your passport? And there will be an HR person at the gate who will receive you. I'm sure it has happened to all of you, right? The HR person took that copy. I still don't know what has happened to that copy, right? And then somebody from my team helped me get to my workstation. My manager gave me my username and password. And first 2 weeks, I was struggling with getting access to system, getting access to benefits, getting access to devices. And it was just not me. My manager was struggling. My HR team was struggling doing background verification. So can we do something better for all these personas? That is one use case that is around fast remote onboarding. So verified ID implements a model where I can go through an identity proofing journey where I can take a selfie, upload a government document, and get a credential as a response. And then I can present that credential to my IT system, to the HR system, to my benefits system, and get provisioned, get access to benefits. HR can easily say, oh, this is an attested data because it is attested by an identity proofing service. So onboarding is done in a fast, cheap, in a quick way. So that's the first use case. The second use case could be, let's say there is a compliance dashboard in my organization. There could be a requirement that you can only access that particular dashboard once you have completed a specific training. I'm guessing this is a common pattern in most organizations, right? And what we do today, we look at, oh, is the user in a specific group? Maybe I will use that as a control, or maybe I'm okay to skip that audit control and say, all right, I accept this risk because I cannot identify whether the user has completed the specific training or not. So what managed secure access use case does is, as a user, when I've completed a training or I've gone through an external process, I can get that acknowledgement in a form of a verifiable credential, and then I can present it to an application. So coming back to that compliance dashboard, I can present a credential by scanning a QR code and say, hey, I've completed this training. And the application can always check this real time. Microsoft, for example, is implementing this use case for onboarding suppliers and vendors. What happens when you onboard a supplier? The supplier will go through an onboarding process of, are you ISO certified? Are you compliant to do business in UK? But that you do it once in a year, and after that you don't do that check. And you keep on releasing purchase orders. Hey, you have done your work. You never know that, is that organization still valid within that particular region? Are they allowed to do business in a particular region or not? So Microsoft Finance is implementing that use case. So as a supplier, when you get onboarded, you get a verifiable credential. So every time they will go through this PO process, they'll have to just present their QR code so that they are who they are, and then they can get paid for the work that they have done. So I'm just giving some examples. The third scenario could be account recovery. I think self-service password reset is something we have experienced in our personal and in professional days. But can I use my driving license to reset an enterprise password? That could be the model you can implement with verified ID. Because I'm bringing in data from my personal domain, which is attested in a form of a credential, and I'm presenting it to my enterprise system to reset a password. And you can obviously build custom solution. I think all of us have scanned QR codes during the COVID times to get an entry to a restaurant and show that, yeah, we are vaccinated. So those kind of scenarios you can easily think of with verifiable credentials. I think I'm running short of time. I'll just quickly go through some of the highlights. We have been in this space for almost 5 years, but we have recently gone into general availability. On 8th of August, we went generally available with this availability of this service. Why it took some time? As I said, this whole product is based on open standards, so the standards have to mature. so that we can implement a technology. So the standards took some time. Also, we wanted to build technology for customer, not for Microsoft. So we have been interviewing a lot of customers. So this data point, which I'm showing on the screen, we interviewed around 5,000 customers across geographies, across scales. And the pattern that we heard from them, today when they onboard an employee, they pay somewhere between $400 to $5,000 to onboard a new hire. And it's a problem today because for a global organization, they may have different processes across geographies. They need to do right to work check, DBS check, and so many complex things. So can we make this simple, fast, and better? We also looked at other data points like how will it scale across geographies and verticals as a part of that data point. But how this whole model works, I'm just going to spend a minute on this diagram. I know the text is very small. We have a deep dive session post-lunch so to detail this diagram. But just to share a highlight, in a centralized world, when there is an identity provider, and as a user, when I go to an application, when I access an application, I will be asked to punch in my username and password on the web app, right? The web app will tell the user, hey, I'm integrated with this directory server. Can you go and authenticate against a directory server? Because there is a line of sight between the web application and the directory server. In a decentralized world, there is no line of sight. And why it's so? Because decentralized model is all about privacy preserving credential. As an issuer, when I've issued you a credential, I should not know where this user is using this credential. Otherwise, the problem that we have seen with the ads that show up on Facebook or Amazon, they can easily create a profile pattern for you, right? So this whole concept is around privacy preserving credentials. So if you look at this diagram, you will see always there are three actors. User is in the center. User goes to an issuer. Issuer will make sure there is an attestation pattern. An attestation pattern could be authenticate against my directory, or go through identity proofing, or I'll give you a one-time password. And basis attestation, issuer can give a credential to a user. Now, as a user, I have one credential, 10 credentials. I can go to multiple issuers and get many credentials. And then I can go to a verifier to present my credential. A scenario could be, I go to my employer to get my proof of employment and store it as a credential. But I can use it in my personal space to get a discount on Waitrose or Sainsbury or Bosch. And I can get those employee discount as well. And as an issuer, I don't know where this user is using this credential. But as a user, I have this benefit of leveraging my same credential in my personal domain as well. Why this is important? So you will see the concept of trust fabric now. For some years, we have been talking about identity as the control plane. Now you will hear us talk about trust fabric, which means you will have a mesh system. You need to make sure the user is using their identity in a secure fashion, but they also have a control on what they are sharing with the application. Okay, so verified ID, as I said, it's a managed service. We have implemented the open standards. You can be an issuer, you can be a verifier, you can be both. I gave many examples of scenarios. It could be a government to citizen scenario, B2B2C scenario, or it could be an employment verification or onboarding scenario. We'll double click on this during our workshop. For a user, we are trying to make sure that their experience is retained. They use their authenticator app for multi-factor today. Can we bring in this credential in the same experience? This app, I think almost everybody would have it on their phone in this room. When we go to App Store or Play Store, we see it as around 4.7, 4.8 in terms of rating. We wanted to make sure that users retain their experience. They don't need to have multiple apps and wallets. But there could be a model where a customer may say, hey, I don't want the Microsoft Authenticator. Can you, Microsoft, give me my custom wallet? Can I build a custom wallet? So we have open sourced that wallet SDK part from Authenticator, and you can easily make your own wallets as well. Right? So just to now bring things to a summary. So I spoke about Azure Active Directory, which is our core IAM offering. where you can onboard your users in a cloud mastered and cloud governed model. We spoke about permissions management. So as an organization, when I offer services to my users, I can make sure right person has right permissions on the right resource across clouds. And when I am building apps as a developer, I'm building apps which are easy for users. I shouldn't be bothered about storing user data. I shouldn't be handling PII data, because then I'm getting into this issue of data governance as well. So keeping various personas in mind, we have been expanding our Entra portfolio, and we have got these 3 products in our pipeline. You can obviously access these products individually from Azure portal, or you can also go to our new admin center, entra.microsoft.com, and you can look at these 3 capabilities. You can easily build experiences in a centralized world and a decentralized world for the same user. I've been giving some examples, like proof of employment. That's a very simple example. Implementing it for secure access, ensuring your joiner, mover, leavers journeys are better, not only for the organization, but for the user as well. And then also look at enabling users to do self-service account update and recoveries. So things like temporary access pass, MFA, you can use I'll tell you a common pattern. When somebody forgets their password, most of the time you'll call help desk, right? Help desk would just make a verbal thing like, hey, can you tell me your employee number? Is that the right way to verify that particular person? Can I bring in more controls? So you can think of verifiable credentials coming in there. You can say, as a help desk user, you can say to the user, hey, can you go to this portal and show me your verified employee credential? Once you successfully prove me that you are a right employee, I can help you through the help desk task. So think about those kind of scenarios with verified ID. So with that, I think I'll close my deck here. Just to summarize, the platform and the products are based on open standards. I won't go into details of this, but I'll leave this slide for you to refer. We have been working very closely with partners. Some of our partners are outside in the booth area for various products and patents. And there are multiple case studies across industries. So if there is an industry where you work, you can look at the relevant case study from the industry. And there are a bunch of resources as well.